Usually when we think about a national competition like, say, the Olympics or the World Cup, there's this built-in expectation of absolute geographic purity.
Right. It's a very clean narrative. You are from the place, therefore you represent the place.
Exactly. You look at the flag embroidered on the athlete's jersey, you look at their passport, you look at where they were born, and it's this direct one-to-one match.
Yeah, the boundaries are strictly drawn.
Right. It's comforting. We like our borders to be visible. But then you step into the world of the modern Eurovision Song Contest, and suddenly that entire map is completely torn up.
Oh, absolutely. The borders just dissolve.
They really do. You're looking at a competitive landscape that operates on a completely different set of rules regarding what actually makes a nation a nation. And today, we're tracking a tiny historic country making a massive, highly engineered play on the global stage.
Which is always exciting.
It is. We're doing a deep dive into Luxembourg's entry into the 2026 Eurovision Song Contest, a track called Mother Nature by an artist named Eva Marija.
And, this isn't just about reviewing a pop song. This specific entry is a literal masterclass in modern European identity.
It really is, and to unpack it, we're looking at a fascinating stack of sources for you today. We've got biographical profiles, some wild historical trivia that stretches back decades, deeply intricate betting odds from late March of 2026, and these extensive lyric sheets translated into dozens of languages.
Which is a whole separate monumental effort we have to get into.
Oh, we will. Our core mission here is to explore what this entry reveals about the highly engineered reality of modern pop music. And really what it means for a nation that used to absolutely dominate this competition to try and reclaim its historic glory. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Before we can really grasp the architecture of the song Mother Nature, we have to understand the architect. Because Eva Marija's background feels, less like a standard pop star origin story and more like a walking, breathing metaphor for the European Union itself.
Yeah, if you were commissioned to build the quintessential hyper-modern European citizen in some kind of cultural laboratory, you would almost certainly end up with someone very much like Eva Marija.
You really would. Let's lay out the foundation of who she is. She was born on December 24, 2005, right in Luxembourg City. But her roots are planted hundreds of miles away.
Right, her parents are Slovenian.
Exactly. They hail from the capital, Ljubljana, and a smaller town called Beltinci. And there's this wonderful little political anchor here. Her grandfather is actually the mayor of Beltinci.
Which perfectly grounds her story.
Yeah.
You have this very specific, hyper-local European political heritage on one side, but then her parents represent the broader transnational machinery of Europe.
Because they moved to Luxembourg for work, right?
Exactly. They emigrated from Slovenia to Luxembourg in 2003. Specifically to work at European Union institutions. And, Luxembourg is one of the de facto capitals of the EU.
Right. They host the European Court of Justice and the European Investment Bank.
Yeah. So she is literally a child of the EU apparatus. She grew up in a household where crossing borders for institutional work was just a family business.
And her education reflects that exact environment. She grew up attending the European School of Luxembourg II. And for those who aren't familiar with that system, what does a European school actually mean in this context? Because that sounds quite different from just, attending a local public high school.
It is entirely different. The European schools were established specifically for the children of staff working for EU institutions.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the entire curriculum is designed to foster a cross-cultural identity. You don't just learn in one language. The linguistic curriculum is incredibly rigorous, and you're surrounded by students from 27 different member states.
Wow, 27.
So from the time she was a toddler, her normal was this multilingual, multi-ethnic, pan-European environment. She was never just from Luxembourg in the traditional sense. She was raised in a bubble that represents the entire continent.
That makes total sense, especially when you look at her musical education, which is just as incredibly diverse. She went to the Conservatoire de Luxembourg. And she didn't just, casually pick up a guitar. She mastered the violin, the piano, and the bass guitar.
Across multiple genres, too.
Right. She studied jazz, classical music, and pop rock.
The mechanics of that kind of musical education are vital to understanding why she is so effective on a stage today. The conservatoire system is notoriously strict.
I can imagine.
When you study classical violin, you are learning rigid discipline, precision, the exact mathematics of centuries-old European compositions. You learn how to bow perfectly, how to read complex sight music. But then, as you mentioned, she also studied jazz bass.
Which is a massive pivot.
Huge. Jazz requires the exact opposite mental framework. Classical asks you to perfectly execute what's on the page. Jazz asks you to throw the page away.
Right, just feel it.
Well, feel it, but also understand the underlying chord structures well enough to improvise entirely new melodies on the spot. It requires a deep understanding of music theory. You need to know exactly which weird, dissonant notes you can play over a dominant seventh chord without making it sound terrible.
And then you throw pop rock on top of that, which is all about taking those complex theories and distilling them down into something incredibly catchy and accessible.
Exactly. Pop music is the art of making the complex sound simple. So her brain is wired for classical discipline, jazz improvisation, and pop accessibility.
That is a lethal combination.
It really is. And to put the final polish on all of that, by 2026, she's studying songwriting at the Institute of Contemporary Music Performance in London.
Which is arguably the epicenter of the commercial pop music industry in Europe.
Totally. So she's taking all that conservatory training and learning how to commercialize it.
Which brings us to her Eurovision origin story, and this is just fantastic. At age 3, she falls completely in love with the violin. Why? Because she watched Alexander Rybak win the Eurovision Song Contest for Norway in 2009 with the song Fairy Tale.
What's fascinating here is the full-circle nature of that inspiration. If you recall that performance of Fairy Tale, Alexander Rybak was this incredibly charismatic guy running around the stage, aggressively playing the violin while dancers did acrobatics around him.
Yeah, it was an iconic performance.
Right, and for a 3-year-old, the kinetic energy of that instrument being played not in a stuffy concert hall, but on a massive flashing pop stage must have been completely intoxicating.
It totally recontextualized the instrument for her. But, hearing all of this, the EU background, the multilingual schooling, the classical jazz and pop training, moving to London, it makes her sound like a musical Swiss Army knife.
A very apt description.
But I want to push back on this a bit. Does having such a highly trained, multidisciplinary, and inherently cross-cultural background make it easier to craft a song that appeals to an entire continent? Or does it run the risk of diluting an artist's specific cultural identity?
That's the big question.
Like, if you were an amalgamation of everywhere, are you essentially from nowhere?
That is the central philosophical tension of modern globalized pop music. On the positive side, her background allows her to speak multiple musical languages fluently. When she sits in a recording studio in London or Luxembourg, she can communicate with producers on a highly technical level.
Because she has the vocabulary for it.
Exactly. She can talk about time signatures and chord inversions. But the risk, as you pointed out, is homogenization. If your influences are perfectly balanced and smoothed out by formal education, you might sand off the rough, idiosyncratic edges that make a piece of music sound distinctly local or raw.
Yeah, you risk sounding perfectly competent, but completely generic.
Precisely. You become a highly skilled technician, rather than a distinct voice. And that tension perfectly frames how her 2026 entry, Mother Nature, was actually brought into existence, because this song was not the result of Eva Marija sitting alone in a darkened bedroom with an acoustic guitar pouring her localized soul onto a page.
No, not at all.
It was born in a highly specialized, intensely collaborative environment.
The Laboratory of Pop. It was conceived at the Rock Lab camp in Luxembourg. And I really want to understand the mechanics of this because the team she collaborated with at this camp is an absolute powerhouse of Scandinavian writers.
Oh, they are heavy hitters.
We have Julie Egard, who goes by the phenomenal stage name Killj from Denmark. We have Maria Broberg from Sweden. And we have Thomas Stengard, also from Denmark. What actually happens at a songwriting camp like this? How does it function?
Songwriting camps are basically the industrial factories of the modern music business. It's not a relaxed jam session. Broadcasters or record labels will rent out a studio complex with multiple rooms. They fly in specialized professionals.
What kind of professionals?
Well, some are top-liners, whose only job is to write the vocal melodies and lyrics. Others are track guys who build the instrumental beats and chord progressions on their laptops. You put a track producer, a top-liner, and an artist like Eva Marija in a room together, usually with a whiteboard.
Wait. A literal whiteboard.
A literal whiteboard. They write down themes, words, target audience demographics, the emotional resonance they want to hit. They treat the song like a product that needs to be architected.
That sounds so clinical.
It is. They might write 3 complete songs in a single day, just throwing ideas against the wall to see what sticks. It is high pressure, hyper efficient, and mathematically driven.
And if you're going to build a pop song mathematically, Thomas Stengard is the guy you want doing the math. His track record is staggering.
Truly unmatched.
He co-wrote Denmark's 2013 winner, Only Teardrops. He wrote Germany's 2018 entry, You Let Me Walk Alone, and their 2019 entry. He's written for San Marino in 2021 and 2026, Cyprus in 2021 and 2023, Azerbaijan in 2022, Austria in 2024, and the United Kingdom in 2025 and 2026.
Its entire empire.
And Julie Agard is right there with him, writing for Malta, Austria, the UK, and San Marino. But hold on, stop right there. I have to ask. If I'm the sovereign nation of Luxembourg returning to the contest, why am I hiring a Danish guy who is simultaneously writing songs for the United Kingdom and San Marino in the exact same year? How is that not a massive conflict of interest?
Because in the context of the Eurovision Song Contest, winning the scoreboard often supersedes geographic purity. The broadcasters want a guaranteed, polished product. When you hire Thomas Stengard, you aren't just hiring a guy who writes a nice tune.
What are you hiring then?
You are hiring his proprietary knowledge of the European televoter's subconscious.
Wow.
Yeah, he knows exactly how long a pre-chorus should be to build tension. He knows the exact frequency range a snare drum needs to hit to sound massive in a 15,000-seat arena.
So it's essentially the Marvel Cinematic Universe of pop music.
That is a brilliant analogy. Think of Stengard as the Kevin Feige of Eurovision.
Okay, expand on that. How so?
Well, what does Kevin Feige do? He doesn't direct every movie, but he oversees a structural formula that is almost mathematically guaranteed to generate $1 billion at the global box office. The pacing, the mix of humor and action, the emotional beats, they all follow a rigorously tested blueprint.
Right, there's a specific rhythm to it.
Stengard does the exact same thing for a 3-minute pop song. He knows the formula that triggers dopamine in a European listener. So while it might seem like a conflict of interest that he's writing for 3 competing countries in the same year, the broadcasters don't care. They just want access to the formula.
Which perfectly explains a very specific YouTube comment we found while researching this. Someone listened to Mother Nature and simply wrote, "This song reminds me Only Teardrop song." They clocked it immediately.
Because human ears are incredible pattern recognition machines. Even if you don't know anything about music theory, your brain subconsciously recognizes structural DNA.
And Only Teardrops and Mother Nature share the same architect.
Exactly. So, of course, the hallways and windows of those 2 songs are going to be the exact same places.
And they are built inside a very strict lot size, so to speak. Mother Nature clocks in at exactly 2 minutes and 59 seconds.
Right against the buzzer.
Yeah, because every single entry in the contest has to be 3 minutes or less. And I was fascinated to learn why this rule actually exists. Because it wasn't always this way, right?
No, in the early days of the contest, the rules were much looser. But in 1957, Italy submitted a song called Corde della mia chitarra. It translates to Strings of My Guitar. And the singer just kept going and going and going.
Oh, no.
The performance lasted for 5 minutes and 9 seconds.
Which in live television time is an absolute eternity.
It's a nightmare for a live broadcast producer. Imagine you have dozens of countries competing. If every country brought a 5-minute ballad, the broadcast would last 6 hours. The pacing of the show would completely collapse.
So the European Broadcasting Union had to step in.
Yes. They instituted the hard cap. No song can exceed 3 minutes.
So every single second of Mother Nature is prime real estate. Let's look at how they decorated that real estate. The lyrics to the chorus are, "From the ground to my skin, as I'm howling at the wind, dig my roots in the mud, and I lean my head back." Eva mentioned that the song uses nature as a symbol of hope, freedom, and groundedness. She described it as a call to reconnect with your inner child and let go of your fears.
It's a very smart thematic choice. When you are trying to appeal to 40 different countries, you have to find a theme that transcends local politics or hyper-specific cultural references.
Yeah, keep it universal.
Exactly. Everyone on Earth understands the concept of standing in the wind or feeling mud on their skin. It's primal. It bypasses language barriers because it evokes a tactile physical memory.
But they didn't just rely on the vibe to bypass language barriers. They literally bypassed the language barriers by brute force. The team translated the lyrics of Mother Nature into 38 different languages. I'm genuinely astounded by this.
It is a monumental, almost unprecedented marketing localization effort for a single pop song.
Just to give you an idea of the scope, they translated it into Armenian, Catalan, Japanese, Occitan, West Frisian, and Hebrew. The German version translates the chorus to "Von der Erde auf meine Haut, wie ich heule im Wind, grab meine Wurzeln in den Boden und lehne meinen Kopf zurück." The Spanish version goes, De la tierra a la mi piel, mientras hallo al viento un tierra les mis raíces en el barro. How difficult is it to actually do this? Because you can't just run lyrics through Google Translate and expect them to fit the melody.
That is the crucial point. The mechanics of translating a song are incredibly complex because you weren't just dealing with meaning, you were dealing with phonetics and rhythm.
Right, the syllables have to match.
Take the English word mud. It's one sharp percussive syllable. If you translate that into a language where the word for mud is 3 flowing syllables, suddenly the singer can't fit the word into the designated space in the melody. The entire rhythmic structure of the phrase collapses.
So you need translators who are also lyricists. They have to find words that mean the same thing, but also have the same number of syllables, and ideally have the same vowel sounds on the high notes so the singer can belt them out properly.
Exactly. You don't want a singer trying to hit their highest, most powerful note on a closed vowel sound like E.
Oh, because it sounds pinched.
Yeah, it physically strains the vocal cords and sounds thin. You want open vowels like oh, oh. So translating this into 38 languages means they had to painstakingly reverse engineer the phonetic math of the melody 38 separate times.
That is wild.
It shows you the sheer capital and infrastructure Luxembourg threw behind this entry. They are ensuring that the emotional core of the song is perfectly intelligible to practically every voting demographic across the globe, long before the artists even arrive in the host city.
But this hyper-optimized industrial approach to songwriting, putting people in a camp, tracking the math, testing the phonetics, it comes with a massive trap door.
It does.
Because when you intentionally design a song to sound universally familiar, you run the very real risk that it sounds too familiar to something that already exists.
Right. And in the music industry, that is when the lawyers get involved.
Which brings us to the controversy that nearly derailed this entire project. Mother Nature faced significant plagiarism claims. People pointed out perceived similarities between Eva's track and a song by the British artist Birdie, specifically a song called Keeping Your Head Up. Now, I really want to understand the music theory behind this. Why do pop songs constantly end up sounding like other pop songs? Are songwriters just aggressively stealing from each other?
Usually no. It's rarely malicious theft. It's a phenomenon called convergent evolution.
Convergent evolution, like in biology.
Exactly like biology.
Right.
Think about sharks and dolphins. They look very similar. They both have dorsal fins and torpedo-shaped bodies, but they aren't closely related. They evolved the same shape independently because it is the most mathematically efficient way to move through water.
Okay, I love that analogy. So how does that apply to a pop song?
Pop music has its own physical laws. There are only 12 notes in the Western musical scale. And within those 12 notes, there are only a handful of chord progressions that actually sound pleasing to the human ear. The most famous is the 4-chord progression. The 1, 5, 6, 4 chords. Hundreds of the biggest hit songs in history use those exact same 4 chords in that exact same order.
Because our brains are hardwired to want the tension to resolve in that specific way.
Yes. When you play a dominant chord, the human ear physically craves the resolution of the tonic chord. So if you put a Swedish topliner in a room in Stockholm and a British topliner in a room in London and ask them both to write an uplifting anthemic chorus over a 4-chord progression, the mathematical probability that they will independently arrive at the exact same melodic hook is incredibly high.
Because it's just the most efficient way to move through the sonic water. But the European Broadcasting Union doesn't care about convergent evolution. If a song is found to infringe on copyright, it can be entirely disqualified from the contest. So the panic behind the scenes at RTL, the Luxembourgish broadcaster, must have been intense.
Oh, imagine the nightmare. You've been absent from the contest for 30 years.
Right.
You finally come back. You hire the elite Scandinavian hitmakers. You translate the song into 38 languages. You build this massive campaign. And suddenly, you were facing disqualification before you even pack your bags.
They had to deploy their media manager, a guy named Jeff Spielman, to aggressively defend the track in the press. He had to go on record to state that Mother Nature was written completely organically at the Rock Hall songwriting camp the previous year, and that Birdie song in no way served as a template.
They had to draw a very firm line.
Yeah, and it took until February 11th, 2026 for the song to finally be officially cleared for participation without any required changes. Spielman essentially had to announce, "Everyone stand down, we are going to Austria, no new song is needed."
Which is a massive relief for the delegation, obviously. But strategically, in the weird world of pop music marketing, controversy like this isn't always a bad thing.
Wait, really? How can being accused of plagiarism be beneficial?
Because it forces engagement. Think about the mechanics of attention. If a song just drops on streaming platforms, people might listen to it once and move on.
Hmm.
But if there's a headline that says, "Did Luxembourg steal this song from Birdie?" What are people going to do?
They are going immediately to YouTube to listen to both songs back to back to see if they can hear the theft.
Exactly. It drives streaming numbers exponentially. People are listening actively, analyzing the chords, debating in the comments sections. And when the artist is ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing, it creates a powerful survivor narrative.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it gives the fans a reason to rally around the artist.
Yeah.
Eva Marija isn't just a girl who was handed a song anymore. She is an artist who was wrongfully accused and survived the trial by fire. It builds emotional investment.
So what does this all mean for her momentum? Surviving the court of public opinion on the internet is one thing. She still had to survive the actual, literal voting public in her own country. Which takes us to the crucible where the domestic audience decides who gets to carry their flag, the Luxembourg Song Contest 2026.
The national final. This is where the laboratory theories meet the reality of a live audience.
The event took place on January 24, 2026, at the Rock Hall in the city of Esch-sur-Alzette. It was hosted by Hanna-Sophia Lopes, Loic Jucum, and Raul Roos. Eva went up against 7 other acts, and she didn't just win, she completely dominated the scoreboard.
It wasn't even close.
No, she won both phases of the 50-50 vote. She took the public televote with 128 points, and she took the international jury vote with 94 points, giving her a massive total of 222 points. I want to break down this 50-50 system because it's the engine that drives modern Eurovision. Why do we divide the power between a jury and the public?
It's a system designed to balance 2 competing priorities: technical excellence and emotional resonance.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, if you leave the voting 100% up to the public televote, the contest often devolves into a popularity contest based on crazy costumes, joke entries, or diaspora voting.
Diaspora voting.
Yeah, where citizens living abroad just vote for their home country regardless of the song's quality.
Right, or you get the guy in a turkey suit winning because it's funny.
Exactly. So, to maintain the musical integrity of the contest, they introduced professional juries. These are panels of music industry professionals, producers, vocal coaches, former artists. They're given strict criteria. They have to judge the vocal capacity of the singer, the composition and originality of the song, and the overall staging. They're looking at the math and the technique.
While the public is sitting at home with a glass of wine, voting purely based on how the performance makes them feel.
Precisely. The televoter doesn't care if the singer perfectly executes a diminished fifth chord. They care if the singer gave them goosebumps. So when an artist like Eva Marija wins both the jury vote and the public vote by a wide margin, it is a massive mathematical flex.
It proves she hit both targets.
Yeah, it proves that Mother Nature is technically flawless enough to impress the snobby music producers, but emotionally resonant enough to connect with the average person on their couch. It means the laboratory experiment worked perfectly.
And the broadcaster made sure the environment of this national final felt incredibly important. The interval acts, the performers who sing while the voting is being tallied, were essentially a massive parade of Eurovision history.
They really pulled out all the stops.
They did. They had JJ, who was Luxembourg's 2025 winner. They had Laura Thorne, Luxembourg's 2025 representative, performing with kids. They flew in Vabe, who represented Iceland in 2025. But the absolute crown jewel of the night was that they brought in Sandra Kim to perform.
Having Sandra Kim there is a profound psychological anchor for a country like Luxembourg.
For those who might not be deep into Eurovision lore, Sandra Kim is absolute royalty. She won the contest for Belgium back in 1986 with the song J'aime la vie. But the crazy trivia here is that she was only 13 years old when she won.
She is the youngest winner in the history of the contest, and she will remain the youngest winner forever because her victory actually forced the EBU to change the rules.
Really?
Yeah, they instituted an age limit of 16, specifically because of the controversy surrounding how young she was.
So why does bringing a Belgian winner from 1986 to a Luxembourgish national final in 2026 matter so much?
Because Eurovision is built on nostalgia and legacy. Luxembourg had been gone for 30 years. Entire generations of their citizens grew up without their country participating. By bringing in a legendary figure like Sandra Kim, who represents the golden era of the 1980s contest, the broadcaster is visually connecting the past to the present.
Oh, that's incredibly smart.
It is. They're
Yeah.
telling their domestic audience, look, we aren't just starting from scratch. We belong in this pantheon, and Eva Marija is the next chapter in this grand, sweeping history.
It's a way of transferring legitimacy. So she's conquered the domestic vote, she's survived the plagiarism scandal, she has the blessing of the 1980s royalty. You would think she is riding an unstoppable wave of momentum.
You would think so.
But then we pivot to how the rest of the continent views Mother Nature. To see that, we have to look at the brutal, unforgiving reality of the global betting odds.
The betting markets are fascinating because they are completely devoid of sentimentality. They are cold, hard financial projections of human behavior.
And looking at the numbers from late March 2026, the picture for Luxembourg is quite sobering. In semifinal 2, which takes place on May 14th, Luxembourg is drawn to perform in the first half. The bookmakers gave Eva only a 1% chance of winning her semifinal. That places her 13th overall in that specific heat.
Let's contextualize that a bit. The contest is broken into 2 semifinals because there are simply too many countries to perform in one night. So you have roughly 15 to 18 countries competing in a heat, and only the top 10 advance to the grand final.
Right, it's a brutal culling process. And Denmark's Søren Torpegaard Lund was leading that specific semifinal with a 35% chance to win the heat, followed by Australia's Delta Goodrem at 22%.
That's a huge gap.
It is, and things don't look much better in the projections for the grand final. In the grand final jury odds, Luxembourg is ranked 14th, again with just a 1% chance. Australia is the predicted jury winner there at 27%. In the grand final televote odds, Luxembourg slips even further to 20th, still sitting at a 1% chance. And Israel's Noam Beton is predicted to win the televote at 27%.
And when you aggregate all of those metrics to look at the overall winner odds for the entire 2026 contest, Luxembourg is ranked 16th, holding incredibly steady at that 1% mark. The runaway favorite to take the whole trophy is Finland's Linda Lampenius and Pete Parkkonen with their song Likenheiten at 28%, followed by Frances Monroe at 12%.
I look at these numbers, and a 1% chance feels devastatingly low, but I want to analyze this using a sports analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you have a league with 37 teams. If Eva is ranked 16th overall, she is sitting right in the fat middle of the pack. She's like a wild card team squeaking into the playoffs. She's not the favorite to win the Super Bowl, but she's definitely not the worst team in the league. Are these early March betting odds genuinely reflecting the structural quality of Mother Nature, or are they being artificially deflated by the geopolitical reality that Luxembourg is a tiny microstate without a massive, built-in regional voting bloc?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sports analogy is exactly how you have to look at this. You have to understand how bookmakers balance their books. Betting odds in March are almost never a pure reflection of musical quality.
Really? What are they reflecting then?
They are a reflection of perceived momentum, historical voting patterns, and visual spectacle. Finland is sitting at 28% because they historically bring highly energetic, visually chaotic, arresting staging concepts that easily go viral on TikTok.
And what about the voting blocks? Because that's a huge part of the Eurovision ecosystem.
It's massive. If you are Sweden, you can mathematically count on a baseline of points from Norway, Denmark, and Finland, simply due to cultural affinity and shared broadcasting markets. If you are Serbia, you have the Balkan bloc. But if you are Luxembourg, you have a tiny population, and you've been absent for 30 years.
Right. Nobody is used to voting for them.
Exactly. Your neighbors, France, Germany, Belgium, haven't been able to vote for you for 3 decades. The muscle memory of voting for Luxembourg has completely atrophied.
So the bookmakers look at Luxembourg and say mathematically they don't have the demographic weight to sweep a public televote regardless of how good the song is.
Exactly. So for a returning microstate to be sitting at 16th overall with a 1% chance to win, well, that is actually a profound success. It means the song is deemed so structurally competent, so undeniably catchy, that it overcomes their demographic disadvantage to sit comfortably in the middle of the pack. It's the difference between being a dark horse contender and a guaranteed failure.
And to truly understand why being a dark horse is actually a monumental achievement for this specific country, we have to pull back and look at the historical weight that Luxembourg carries into this contest, because their history is legendary, but it's also Incredibly ironic.
It is full of profound contradictions.
Let's examine the track record. Luxembourg is fundamentally a Eurovision powerhouse, and they have won the entire contest 5 times in 1961, 1965, 1972, 1973, and 1983. Only a handful of nations have that many trophies. But here is the most mind-bending piece of trivia in this entire story. Out of those 5 historic, triumphant victories, none of the winning artists were actually from Luxembourg.
Not a single one. It's an incredible fact.
4 of those winners were French citizens. This includes France Gall, who sang the absolutely legendary, culturally massive hit Poupée de Cire, Poupée de Sang in 1965, a song written by Serge Gainsbourg, another Frenchman. And the one winner who wasn't French was Vicky Leandros, who won in 1972 with Après Toi. She was Greek.
For decades, Luxembourg operated almost like a corporate sports franchise rather than a nation state. They didn't rely on homegrown talent. They essentially outsourced their entries. Because they were a wealthy nation with a very powerful broadcaster, RTL was a dominant force in European radio and television at the time. They had the financial resources and the industry connections to just hire the biggest, best French singers and the most elite international songwriters to secure victories.
It was a mercenary approach to national pride, and it worked brilliantly. But then Luxembourg took a massive 30-year hiatus. From 1994 all the way to 2023, they simply vanished from the Eurovision stage. They only just returned in 2024, where they successfully qualified for the grand final. But why did they leave for 30 years? You have a winning formula, you have 5 trophies, and you just walk away.
The reasons are always complex, but at the end of the day, it almost always comes down to money. There is an incredible financial burden attached to this contest. The tradition is that the winning country hosts the event the following year. But the scale of Eurovision has grown exponentially since the 1970s.
What does hosting actually entail financially? Because people might just think it's renting a stage for a night.
Oh, it's astronomical. You don't just need a stage. You need an arena that can hold 15,000 people. You need to build a press center capable of hosting thousands of international journalists for 2 full weeks. You need to secure hotel accommodations for 40 competing delegations. You need massive security infrastructure. It costs tens of millions of euros.
Tens of millions, wow.
And historically, nations have literally pleaded poverty to get out of it. The Netherlands, France, Monaco, and Luxembourg itself have all declined to host after winning because the financial strain was just too great. The United Kingdom has actually had to step in and host 4 different times to cover for countries that won but couldn't afford to throw the party.
So for a small country like Luxembourg, winning the contest is almost a terrifying prospect. It's a massive financial liability.
It is. And beyond the money, there is immense geopolitical pressure. The stakes of this contest are incredibly high. It is not just a lighthearted talent show. It is a major geopolitical stage where national reputations are managed, debated, and broadcast to nearly 200 million people worldwide.
And we see the geopolitical reality reflected in the strict enforcement of EBU rules. Just to provide some purely factual, historical context on how serious the European Broadcasting Union takes this platform, Russia was entirely excluded from the contest in 2022 following the invasion of Ukraine. And Belarus was expelled in 2021 because they submitted a song with lyrics that were deemed to have political undertones, mocking a pro-democracy movement.
We bring up those facts to illustrate the intense gravity of the environment Eva Marija is stepping into. When you walk onto that stage, you are holding the geopolitical weight of your nation's flag. Exclusions and expulsions happen because the platform is that powerful. It is soft power diplomacy wrapped in a pop song.
And that brings us perfectly back to Eva Marija, because this is where the irony of Luxembourg's evolution really crystallizes for me. In the 1960s and 70s, Luxembourg hired French singers to win the contest for them. They outsourced the face of the nation. Now in 2026, they are sending Eva Marija. She is a native-born Luxembourger. She was born in Luxembourg City. She perfectly represents the modern, diverse, institutional demographic of the country through her Slovenian heritage and her EU background.
She is the authentic face of modern Luxembourg.
Exactly. But to compete on this hyper-engineered modern stage, she had to go to a songwriting camp and use Danish and Swedish hitmakers to craft the actual music.
It is a complete paradigm shift. They went from outsourcing the face of the entry to outsourcing the architecture of the entry. Eva Marija represents a Luxembourg that is finally comfortable putting its own authentic citizen on the stage, but they acknowledge that to survive the brutal mathematics of modern pop music, they have to use the hyper-globalized tools of the industry.
It is an incredibly layered journey we've tracked today. We started by unpacking Eva Marija's unique upbringing. A child of the EU apparatus, disciplined in classical violin, fluent in jazz, and studying commercial pop in London. We looked at the industrial laboratory that engineered Mother Nature, bringing together elite Scandinavian writers to build a mathematically perfect hit that was localized into 38 different languages.
We analyzed the music theory behind the plagiarism controversy and how surviving that trial by fire turned a potential disaster into a compelling narrative of resilience. We broke down the mechanics of the 50-50 jury and televote system and saw her dominate the domestic Luxembourg Song Contest in front of the legendary Sandra Kim.
We confronted the brutal reality of the global betting odds, learning why a 1% chance and a 16th place ranking is actually a massive victory for a returning microstate without a built-in voting bloc. And finally, we looked at the massive economic and historical weight of Luxembourg's 5 outsourced victories and their 30-year absence from this high-stakes geopolitical stage.
When you lay all of that context out, it radically changes how you hear the song. It ceases to be just 3 minutes of pop music and becomes a fascinating historical document.
It absolutely does. So why does all of this matter to you as a listener? Well, whether you're prepping for a massive Eurovision watch party, trying to figure out the odds for your local betting pool, or you're just genuinely fascinated by how complex geopolitics, cultural identity, and commercial pop music intersect on live television, you are now fully equipped to understand the deep structural nuances of this specific entry. You aren't just watching a singer perform a catchy tune, you are watching a historic nation fundamentally redefine itself in real time.
And that leaves us with one final lingering thought for you to mull over. Think deeply about the entry we just dissected. We have a song representing the sovereign nation of Luxembourg. It is sung by a woman with Slovenian roots. It was co-written and produced by a camp of Danes and Swedes. It was translated into 38 different languages for maximum global marketing appeal, and it will be judged by a panel of international music professionals and viewers across 40 nations.
It's staggering when you put it like that.
Right. So if an entry is this thoroughly globalized, engineered, and cross-pollinated, does the concept of a national entry even exist anymore? Or has the Eurovision Song Contest successfully engineered something entirely unprecedented, the world's first truly borderless genre of music?
That is a phenomenal thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an absolute pleasure unpacking this with you.